Welcome back to the gun bench. Today we're going to be taking a look at an Ithaca. So this Ithaca here is an NID. It's a new Ithaca double. It is their Magnum 10 gauge. So the NID replaced the Ithaca Flues. The Flues was like a black powder era gun. It wasn't really up to snuff for all of the new shot shells and everything coming out in the 1920s. So the new Ithaca double was designed in 1926. It had a lot of features that were a little bit different than the Flues. I actually have a Flues. I'll do a video on that eventually. But the Flues had a sliding underbolt. This guy went to a rotary top hook. The Flues also had it had less metal in general. The hammer's cocked a different way. So all the internals on the NIDs, the new Ithaca doubles, were entirely different than the Flues that it replaced. So you might see some 10 gauge cartridges that were like 1 5/8 ounces. Well, the NID, the short 10s, would have been perfectly fine handling those. So those heavy 10 gauge cartridges that you'll run into occasionally would have been shot out of NIDs. This NID, though, is a Magnum. So it has a 3.5-inch chamber, not a 2 7/8-inch chamber. It's interesting because the 3.5-inch shell, the 3.5-inch 10 gauge, was developed before guns were developed to shoot it. So here's a fired 3.5-inch compared to a fired 2 7/8. I don't have any loaded down here on my bench right now. They're actually all still out of my truck. But the 3.5-inch shell was designed to shoot 2 ounces of shot. So this was a significant increase over the 1 5/8 that the short 10 could do, and the 1 1/4s that were before that. So this gun in particular, this is a field grade. Take a look here. It says it right up here, new Ithaca field grade. And we have Ithaca Gun Company, Ithaca, New York. This gun's in all right shape. Couple stress cracks there. Nothing too fancy. Massive beaver tail forearm here, just absolutely massive. This gun weighs a ton. It also has 32-inch barrels, choked full and full. This gun was only offered for about 10 years between 1932 and 42. Again, it was designed for the Western Cartridge Company's 3.5-inch, 2-ounce load. So Spencer Olin from Western Cartridge made a deal with Lou Smith to design this gun. These guns were only offered in 32 and 34-inch barrels. So this guy is 32-inch barrels, choked full and full. We take a look here. The massive strength of these guns, we'll see in just a moment. But if we take off our massive beaver tail forearm here, which is, again, just gigantic. This isn't a gun that you really want to be toting through upland hunting. Again, it's going to be a little wet because I actually literally hunted with this a couple hours ago. I'm bringing it down to clean it. But if we take a look at the actual barrels here, you'll notice the actual lugs, they're just massive. Everything is just over-engineered on this. If you take a look at a Flues, there'll be a large gap here. It's not solid. This actually will extend all the way down through the frame of the NID here, which is a little bit different. So we take a look at our actual barrels here. You'll see that it's labeled 4 and 4. Ithacas, they really took the guesswork out of this. They tell you what they're choked, so a 4 is a full choke. So whenever you see a number designation on an Ithaca, it'll let you know what the chokes are, what they should be, because they might be different depending on how old they are or someone reamed them out. But if you take a look at this, it's just super engineered. You see the F, that doesn't mean full choke. This is a field grade. It's their bottom grade. These guns, the 10 gauge 3.5-inch Magnums, are only made for 10 years. There's estimated 887 that were made. They're not super rare, but they come up at auction occasionally. But they're a pretty cool gun. Parker also has a 3.5-inch gun that's incredibly rare, and they're a little more expensive than these if you ever run into them. But these guns were made for a little while. They're really the long fowling, just king, long fowling king. So you have a 32-inch barrel, full and full, The gun weighs a ton, so you don't even feel the recoil from it. So actually, when I was hunting with this today, I wasn't using 3.5-inch shells. I was using 2 7/8. That is loaded a little heavier. But if you take a look here, you can kind of see it. It says 3.5-inch chamber, or 3.5-inch chambers. That's what sets these guns apart, because they can take some pretty hefty loads. The big difference, though, is these guns, you're not going to be shooting steel through them. You're going to blow the chokes out. They're not designed for steel shot, so you have to be using bismuth. You might be able to use really small sizes, so if you're using like a TSS maybe 10 shot or something, that might work. Not sure, haven't tried it. But I shoot bismuth out of this. I actually just killed geese with a number 4 shot using this gun. But these are an interesting chapter of American waterfowling history. So Ithaca, this new Ithaca double, they were built really strong. The short 10s were built really strong, but this is just to another level. This was engineered specifically for the 3.5-inch Western shell for firing 2 ounces. Now you can get custom loads. Boss makes some. Salt Creek, you can get them made that are even higher than 2 ounces. They'll be in similar pressure ranges. So these guys can really reach out and touch them. And they're a lot of fun to hunt with. But if you want to know a little bit more about these, there's a bunch of Ithaca books. I don't have many of Ithaca books because Ithacas aren't really where my collecting interest lies. But Michael McIntosh in Best Guns, he has a whole chapter dedicated to Ithaca. He talks a little bit about the flues. He talks about the NIDs, and he talks a little bit about these guns as well. But these are a cool gun, a cool part of American history, especially for waterfowl hunters, with the 3.5-inch chamber. So at the end of this video, I'll post a couple pictures of some successful hunts. I shot a couple ducks with this thing last week in Jersey. Actually, not even last week. It was a few days ago, Martin Luther King Day, in New Jersey. With my 3.5-inch reloads, they performed horribly. I tested them at 50 yards. I was killing a duck every time with them, or a goose. And that was back in the summer. However, I think my crimp just opened a little bit, and just from sitting, and I don't know if my wad pressure came off or powder migrated or whatever happened, but I had my very first shot of the day on a goose was literally just a dud. Barely even made it out of the barrel. And then my second shot wasn't very good, and I feathered a bunch of birds. I ended up killing my limited black and a hybrid black and mallard, but it was a hard hunt. Today, using my 2 7/8-inch reloads, didn't have any issues at all. And the gun can shoot 2 7/8, 3-inch, 3.5, whatever you're loading, essentially. I don't worry about it too much with pressures. But there's still a lot of life left in this. And I pattern her at 50 yards, and almost everything I shoot out of her that I load is a deadly pattern at 50 yards. And I'm sure they say that they're 70, 80, 100-yard guns. They could be. I don't really shoot it that far. But there's definitely the capability of these big old mighty 10s reaching out and touching them that far for pass shooting or whatever. But this gun did really well for me today. I got a Pennsylvania limit of geese with it. Ithaca is a wonderful American company. I have one of their flues. We might take a look at that a little bit later. But hope you enjoyed this. If you didn't know much about these guns, they're still out there. You can find them. There's higher graded ones as well. This one, again, is just a field grade. If you want to check the chokes, it's the numbers here. They'll be marked very clearly that they're 3.5-inch chambers. You can have them measured, because there are NIDs that are not 3.5-inch chamber. So just because you buy an NID 10 gauge does not mean that you have a 3.5-inch chamber. Most of them are 2 7/8. Most of them are short 10s. They can still handle stout loads. They're in good shape, but they are not a 3.5-inch gun. There was a real, like in 1937, there were also a few of these made in 12 gauge that were chambered for the 3-inch 12 gauge loads. So think about Bo Whoop. That gun, like a 3-inch, just Fox gun, something like that. There were a couple of those that were made. There weren't many. So you might find an NID mag that is a 12 gauge with a 3-inch chamber. Very rare. But this guy, 3.5-inch chamber, will be marked clearly. Chokes will be marked. You will know that this is a 3.5-inch gun if you look for all the markings on it. Measure the chambers, of course. make sure they're in good condition, because these guns, they'll still reach out and touch them, and they're as good as any waterfowl gun out there. So hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully she gets some more ducks and geese next year. Our season's pretty much done. It ends tomorrow, and I don't think I'll be going out. So keep these old guns alive.